because they used to make me really nervous. And so I just would go inside because I was too afraid of like messing it up. And now I have no problem. I'm thinking, if I mess it up, I mess it up. Who cares? But if you'd asked me a couple years ago, that wouldn't have been the case. And hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode. As always, I am so thankful and glad that you are here and sharing this time with me. I know that I often listened to these episodes, and podcasts are what really helped my drive when I was headed into work. For a while, my drive to work was not terribly long, but 45 minutes or so. And so having something to listen to on that drive was just super helpful. And I hope that for you, it's the same. Whether it's while you're driving or maybe you're running, whichever, I'm glad to be there and sharing space with you today. So where we are today, it's a little bit of a kind of a dreary, rainy day. And it's so funny. I used to find rainy days, they would just bring me down into a bad space. I mean, I would just feel tired and sluggish and, maybe have some of those really negative thoughts that I try to keep away and out. And since I've put in this work and I've made this change to living a life of being more present and lessening the anxiety and all the work that I've put in, it's amazing. Rainy days now I feel are so refreshing. I can feel really cozy and I actually enjoy that slower pace. I don't beat myself up for maybe wanting to move at a little bit slower rate than I would on a sunny day. And so I'm actually really kind of cooped up, cozy, and I keep the lights down and I just kind of turn a little lamp on. I have my little space heater here because it's a little chilly and it just feels really happy and cozy. So I wanted to talk to you today about why I stopped drinking and consuming caffeine. And I'm sharing this with you because I actually just had a little bit of caffeine just the other day, and some of the old effects started coming up again. And so I realized how important it is to keep my behaviors of not consuming caffeine because of the impact that it has on my mind and on my body. And I want to share this with you because if you're experiencing some of these symptoms and concerns, maybe take a look at the caffeine that you're consuming, because I'm telling you, cutting that out has really made such a huge shift, and made some of this self-development work easier or more possible because I'm not pushing through and against the effects of caffeine as well. So by no means am I a health expert. I am not a doctor. I am not a scientist. So please take anything that I say here with a bit of a grain of salt and do your own research. I know every body is different. So what has affected me and the way it's affected me, it might not be the same for you. But there's several ways to kind of look into that, or I know getting blood work done and things can give you a little bit more insight. But here's just a couple of overview points that I've discovered in the research that I've done. So caffeine is found in several different vehicles. Most often we think coffee, and we think soda and tea. And those really are the primary locations I would ever consume caffeine, would be in those three vehicles. Of course, you can still get decaf of these, but even a decaf beverage is still going to have a little bit of caffeine in it. There's just not necessarily a way to completely eliminate the caffeine that's present. So even a decaf drink could still give you some of the same negative effects, not quite as heightened as maybe some caffeine, but it's still present in those forms of consumption, possibly. So when we consume caffeine, what's happening is caffeine is actually a drug, right? And so what it's doing in your body is going to affect you in a lot of different ways. And what it was doing for me was I typically have a pretty strong internal energy. I mean, without caffeine, I'm still very talkative and very social. And so once I added that level of caffeine on top, I actually was finding myself getting to a point where kind of jittery during the day. But it was hard to cut out because even with those jitters, I was more focused. So caffeine really started coming up for me. I actually never drank coffee until I was in college and during finals week because it allowed me to focus. It wasn't so much the fact that it kept me up and awake. It just put my brain and like put me on one track and made me focus and get something done. I'm not diagnosed ADD, but I'm pretty sure there's a part of me that is. And so having that caffeine allowed me to like push past all the other, things going on in my surroundings and focus on the one thing at hand. And so I found it really helpful. But then the problem was as soon as I wasn't focusing on a task, I was extremely jittery. I would shake sometimes. And then it would also upset my stomach. So those were real physical responses that I was having and that you may find when you have caffeine. That physical shaking, that maybe some headaches, and then also the upset stomach. And especially if I drank coffee or caffeine for more than a couple of days in a row, it would really tear up my stomach. And so I knew that maybe I shouldn't be drinking it, but I still occasionally would, sometimes even when something is going to make you feel bad, it's still hard to cut it out because sometimes it just tastes so good. So I kind of went along that way for a while. I didn't have caffeine or coffee regularly, but just sort of when I felt like I needed to have that focus until I started working in the corporate world. And at that point, it just became more about like having the routine than it was about actually having the energy. And so every morning I would either make or I would go buy a coffee. And then for lunch, would have a diet soda with my lunch. So after a few months, it dawned on me that all I was drinking during the day was coffee and Diet Coke. And then by like late afternoon, maybe I would have some water. And so at this point, not only was I experiencing those jitters and headaches and stomach pains, I was also extremely anxious. And I already have a bit of innate anxiety in me. But by heightening it with that caffeine, I was just, not even wanting to leave the house, not being afraid of anything. It's so funny. I actually started really fearing even going into the grocery store. I don't know why specifically the grocery store, but just that act seemed so daunting to me. And I came across, at this point, I was thinking there's got to be a change. Maybe I should go consult a doctor and talk to somebody about this anxiety because it's getting so bad. And so I Googled, because that's what I do with everything. I Googled, anxiety and what are ways to maybe naturally work through it? Because I felt like for me, this isn't something I personally, I felt like this was something that I could work through, that I could change a behavior in my day and work through this anxiety. Now, for some, that's not always the case, and absolutely consult someone if you feel like you need to. So I did some searching and I came across a book by Charlie, and his last name I think is Hohen. He wrote a book called Play It Away. And without even going through the whole book, what was interesting was in just a short line, he mentioned that he was drinking, or a coworker was drinking coffee and diet soda every day. And that as soon as she cut those things out, so much of her anxiety went away. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's exactly what I'm doing. So I immediately cut out that coffee and cut out that soda, and those anxiety levels really decreased. Now, I'm not saying this as a diagnosis for you by any means, but I hope that when you're thinking about your consumption of various, whatever it might be, food, drink, that you do pay notice to what it's doing for your body. Because a lot of times we come at it and we think, oh my gosh, I have anxiety. I need to medicate for that. Or I need to, maybe you think I'm anxious because I don't get enough sleep or whatever. But caffeine is another one of those sources that might just be really too much for you. One of the things that I had done in my research is that there's studies that say that caffeine increases your stress hormone. And so because it's increasing things like your heart rate, it can increase your blood pressure, all of that starts to heighten. And then that level of anxiety comes with it too. I don't know about you, but if I have caffeine and my heart starts racing, because my heart's racing, then I start panicking because my heart's racing. So it's like this whole cycle of things that you don't even need to be a part of if you can cut the caffeine. Now, for those of you that are heavy caffeine drinkers, maybe regular coffee, and the idea of not having coffee is just daunting, just start trying to limit it or start turning to decaf, because caffeine is and acts like a drug. It is going to be hard to come off of if it's something that you've been so accustomed to. I personally just cut it out completely. I found that much easier, even if it meant that I might have a couple of days of headaches or maybe a couple of days as feeling really sluggish. I was okay with that. But if you want to come off of it slowly, of course, do what feels right for your body. Interestingly, now when I do have caffeine, the effects of it are very strong. So just the other day, I ended up grabbing a soda for lunch, a diet soda, which I really don't hardly ever do anymore. But I didn't have anything to drink, and that's what I grabbed. And I felt fine the day of, but then even into the next day, I felt really sluggish and like puffy. My eyes were tired. There was pressure behind my eyes. And I thought there's no way that this caffeine could have lingered in my system for so long. But actually, in doing a bit of research, I did find that the half-life of caffeine, meaning how long it takes for half of the caffeine level to leave your body, is typically about 5 to 7 hours, but then the other half can linger for a very long time. And I think when your body's not used to that caffeine, and if you're not flushing it out properly, it can linger for a while. So the moral of the story here is that if you are in a place of feeling like you have heightened anxiety, you get anxious more easily, you have some of those jitters and shakes, if you will, check the caffeine that you're consuming. You might be surprised. The other source of caffeine that unfortunately comes up for me is in certain medications. So I do take a medication once a month depending on how I feel. Like if I'm feeling really bloated and cramped and everything, and that actually has a really high level of caffeine. So I have to be cautious I usually take a half dosage, and I really only take it in the morning with food. I don't try not to take it at night because it affects my sleep. So there's certain medications too that have anxiety that have caffeine. Well, I guess in turn they have anxiety, have caffeine in them, which could affect you as well. With this change in and reduction in caffeine, I'm telling you, the results on my anxiety levels is just huge. One of the things that I wanted to share with you was just some of the feelings that you might be seeing if you're not sure, well, is this anxiety? Is this not anxiety? When I was at that point that I felt like I've got to find some sort of answer, I really was looking to see if maybe I needed to find some help. As Charlie in his book talks about, he says, if someone had tapped me in the chest, my body would have shattered. If someone had ordered me to cry, my face would have flooded. I felt fragile, weak, and hollow. And I think that's where a lot of us can end up when we have this crippling anxiety without a feeling like there's anything to do about it. He said that it affected how he breathed, how he thought, how he ate, how he slept, and how he talked. He tried everything to fix it. So things like yoga, meditation, breathing, therapy, journaling, supplements, fasting, prayer. But at the same time, it still just didn't cure what he was feeling. And I think because our bodies are so sensitive to what we put in them, just an outside source of something like yoga or meditation is going to help, but it might not be leveling the chemical levels that are happening in your body. It's worth giving it a try. Of course, I'm not a guarantee. There's not a guarantee here. There's no straight answer. But if your caffeine consumption, even if it's minimal, I mean, like I mentioned, I hardly drink any, but I had one soda the other day, and that's what it did to me. So even if your consumption is really slim, it might be worth giving it a try and seeing how it helps you. I would be really interested to hear if you do try. I was actually just talking to a friend the other day, and she said that she cut out caffeine about a month ago and has seen a huge improvement in her anxiety levels. We were kind of joking about some of the things that give us anxiety, and I, for example, had to go to the bank yesterday and use I don't even know what it's called, but the drive through where you put the, money in the chute and it goes into the bank. And that's the first time I've ever used one. And it's really because they used to make me really nervous. And so I just would go inside because I was too afraid of like messing it up. And now I have no problem. I'm thinking, if I mess it up, I mess it up. Who cares? But if you'd asked me a couple years ago, that wouldn't have been the case. And so she and I were kind of joking because she said that's one of the things that's always made her nervous too, or maybe even drive-throughs kind of make her a little bit nervous. And so she cut caffeine about a month ago and has seen a huge increase in um, the way she's able to show up and not feeling as anxious. So give it a try. Like I said, I would love to hear what some of your results are, and if this has helped you at all, and what ways you've decided to replace the caffeine in your life. So, for me, I drink my kombucha and that's like my event for the day and I really enjoy it. So I don't feel like I need to turn to soda, or some other sort of craving. I have my protein shakes in the morning, which replace my craving for like an iced coffee or something, because by the time I drink my protein shake, I'm full and I can't even think of drinking something like a coffee. So with that, it's a short one today. I'm so thankful for you as always. If this is something that you think would be helpful for someone else, please share it with them. I would love to be able to support as many people as I can. And I thank you all for your support as I follow this journey myself. Make it a great day.